Myles White, welcome to Syracuse.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and of course, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on this mini podcast, Syracuse football just a few hours ago made a new addition to its coaching staff. They hired a new wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator, Myles White, per ESPN's Adam Rittenberg. Myles White replaces Ross Douglas, who left Syracuse just a couple of weeks ago to take the Oregon wide receiver coaching job. We're going to talk about his qualifications, and I will also give you guys my takeaways here on this mini podcast. Let's talk about Myles White, shall we? Number one, he is a former NFL wide receiver, so he climbed to the very tippy top of the profession of football, of course. Now, if you haven't heard of Myles White as an NFL wide receiver, that's okay. He wasn't exactly a household name. He wasn't someone that you were drafting on your fantasy football team. In 2013, he was with the New York Giants. In 2015, he was with the Green Bay Packers. And in 2016, he was on the practice squads for the New York Jets and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, following those NFL stints, he did play a few more seasons professionally, but not in the NFL. And then in 2019, he transitioned to coaching football. And from 2019 to 2020, he was with SMU as a quality control coach. And SMU, for what it's worth in that time frame, they went 17-6. I mean, he was a low-level coach, but they were a good team during that stretch. So you can take that for what it's worth. In 2022 and 2023, Myles White was at Miami of Ohio. He was the wide receiver coach there. And this past year, 2024, he was a Green Bay Packers coaching assistant. Now, from the bios that I have read about Myles White, it does not say exactly what he was doing with the Green Bay Packers as a coaching assistant, but I imagine it had something to do with the wide receivers, given that he is a former professional wide receiver. And when he was with Miami, Ohio, he was a wide receivers coach. So here are my takeaways. I'll start with the first one here. I like his qualifications. I think he's pretty similar to Ross Douglas. But having said that, there's no real way to know how a wide receiver coach is going to do. This is a position coach. And I should also throw in passing game coordinator as well. That's pretty important. But he does have good qualifications, right? He's been an assistant coach since 2019. He played in the National Football League. And when you compare him up to Ross Douglas, who I think we can all agree did a fine job with Syracuse's wide receivers in 2024, Ross Douglas was with the Patriots for 3 years. And before that, he had brief stints with Richmond and Rutgers. So they're actually pretty similar profiles at the time that they were hired. And I do like that Myles White is not a first-time wide receiver coach. He has done it before. At least he did it at Miami of Ohio. And he's been with the Packers, like I told you, and he was also with SMU. So he is relatively qualified. Now, coming up, I will tell you guys another takeaway that I had, really just proposing questions to you all. And also, I will give you guys my thoughts on my appearance on Q Sports Talk this afternoon. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. March basketball is almost here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. I love how I can make my picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. And guess what? When I win, my money hits my account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Can Myles White, the new wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator, get the most out of Syracuse wide receivers and the passing game in general? Well, guess what, folks? That is the million-dollar question, right? Because Syracuse's wide receivers are going to be different than what they were last season. We're not going to be able to compare apples to apples here, right? Jackson Meeks is gone. He was their number one outside wide receiver last year. He's gone, right? In comes Darryl Gill, the new wide receiver one. He seems primed for an expanded role. The number two wide receiver, at least on the outside, is up for grabs. There's going to be a competition for that role. At least Trevor Pena is back, as I have been telling you all. Trevor Pena is one of the best slot receivers in the country, so Myles White does have that going for him. I really do want to see how Darryl Gill progresses in year three and how much the Myles White hire impacts his development, because he was doing great under Ross Douglas as basically the fifth or sixth option on Syracuse's offense last year. He's ready for a new role. How is he going to be with Myles White as the new wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator for Syracuse football, replacing Ross Douglas? I also wonder how Myles White himself feels about the current wide receiver room for the Orange, because if you recall, when I had on 24/7 Sports Syracuse insider Mike McAllister on this podcast just a few weeks ago, I believe, he mentioned that wide receiver could be an area of interest for Syracuse football in the spring transfer portal window. Because if you recall, they went after Penn State wide receiver Amari Evans before ultimately he decided to go to Washington. And he would have been a starter for Syracuse football in 2025, not 2029. Really, my only thought on Amari Evans was he a special exception that Syracuse was just going after him because they love the player, or are they actually looking to add a wide receiver? And I do wonder how a guy like Myles White feels about the current unit and potentially adding to the wide receiver. So overall, those are my thoughts on Syracuse's new wide receiver coach, Myles White, replacing Ross Douglas. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you believe that this was a good hire for the Orange, or would you have liked to have seen someone else be hired? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, I want to transition subjects a little bit here, all right? I want to give you guys my thoughts on the Q Sports Talk appearance I had earlier this afternoon. I appeared on Orange Nation with Paulie and Steve, and I'm going to link that interview and that conversation in the comment section below for you all. I'll pin it right there so you can watch it or listen to it after you're done watching and listening to this, right? Number one, I got nothing against Paulie or Steve personally, or anyone really at Q Sports Talk. In fact, I would like to say thank you to them all for inviting me on the podcast. I believe, or not the podcast, on the radio station. I believe it was my third appearance with them. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Number two, thank you. Yes, you that's watching or listening to this podcast. And why am I thanking you, right? Why, Jackson? Why are you thanking me? I'll tell you why, all right? Because I heard that some of you all wanted me to appear on it. I heard that, and that's amazing to hear. That really is. It means so much to me. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm glad that some of you wanted me to appear on it, and I hope that I made you all happy that I did. So thank you all so much for that. It shows that you care. So thank you. And also, if you hate me, thank you as well. Don't worry. It's okay if you're a hater. You don't like this podcast. You don't like me personally. That's fine. That's all good. And I'm sorry that I'm only 23 years old. Don't worry. I am human. I will eventually get older. I promise. But for now, I am a little young. I get it. But thank you, even if you do not like me. That's okay. And number three, I think we are all on the same team. We all want Syracuse to win games, right? We want Syracuse to win. Whether our thoughts on it might differ. How we see Syracuse winning now and in the future is going to differ from person to person. I give you my thoughts. Orange Nation will give you their thoughts. The other hosts will give you their thoughts on that station as well. But overall, we're all on the same team. We all want to see Syracuse, any sport, win games. So those are my thoughts on the appearance earlier this afternoon. And again, if you missed it, don't worry. I will link it in the comment section below. Now, as far as what is coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast in the future, tonight, I hope to get Grayson Boone and Kenton Gibbs, the hosts of Locked On Wolfpack, here on the podcast for a crossover episode because Syracuse and NC State are about to play a huge basketball game tomorrow night. So hopefully we can break it all down tonight. If not, that's okay. Regardless, tomorrow night, in case you missed it, Syracuse basketball has a big conference game against NC State at 7 p.m. Eastern. The winner of that game may clinch themselves a spot in the ACC tournament, not officially, but might. And the loser of that game may very well be out of the ACC tournament when the regular season is over. It is a huge one. And guess what? No matter the stakes, there will be a full post-game reaction podcast to that game. And hopefully, Syracuse basketball wins it. Now, thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. And if you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse because it helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all again soon.